Welcome, dear listeners, to a tale of mystery, fate, and impossible choices. Imagine this: a young woman lost and alone in a foreign land, with no money, no documents, and nowhere to turn. Just when all hope seems lost, a powerful and enigmatic stranger steps in, offering salvation, but at a price. Why did he choose her? What secrets is he hiding? And most importantly, will she escape, or will she willingly step into a life she never expected? Stay with us as we unravel the story of a woman who thought she was saved, only to realize she might have been trapped all along. The scorching sun of Kuwait City poured over the skyline, turning the desert horizon into a golden blaze. Skyscrapers loomed in the shimmering heat, their glass reflecting the blinding sunlight, while the streets pulsed with life, an intricate maze of markets, luxury cars, and hurried footsteps. For Emily Carter, a young woman far from the familiar streets of Texas, the city's splendor was suffocating rather than mesmerizing. The overwhelming heat pressed against her skin, making every breath feel heavier. Sweat clung to her clothes as she walked aimlessly, a thin layer of dust settling on her already worn-out sneakers. Just moments ago, she had pleaded with the receptionist of her hotel, her voice tight with desperation. "Please, just one more night," she had whispered, gripping the counter, her nails digging into the polished wood. The receptionist, dressed in an immaculate uniform, had merely given her a blank stare, the answer clear before he even spoke. "I'm sorry, miss. Hotel policy." And just like that, she had been cast out, her last haven in this foreign city stripped away. With nothing but a battered bag slung over her shoulder, she wandered through the narrow streets, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then came the unmistakable feeling she was being watched. Emily's breath hitched as she stole a glance behind her. A man followed her at a measured pace, his presence distinct even among the busy crowd. He was tall, poised, and wore the traditional Kuwaiti dishdasha, his dark eyes concealed beneath the shade of his headscarf. She had noticed him before. Back at the hotel lobby, he had been there, standing with an air of quiet authority. He hadn't spoken to her, hadn't approached, but his gaze had lingered just a moment too long. And now, here he was, walking the same path she was, his every step deliberate. Panic surged through her veins. Quickening her pace, she maneuvered through the crowd, her heart drumming in her ears. She turned sharply into an alleyway, hoping to lose him in the labyrinth of streets. But as she emerged from the shadowed passage, she found herself face to face with two uniformed officers. "Papers, please," one of them demanded, extending a hand toward her. His voice was flat, expectant, as though he already knew the answer. Emily froze. She had no documentation, no legal right to be here. She swallowed hard, clutching her bag tighter. The officers exchanged knowing glances, one of them shaking his head slightly. "She has no papers," the taller officer murmured in Arabic to his partner. "Another undocumented foreigner." Emily's pulse pounded. She could feel her freedom slipping away, the walls of inevitability closing in around her. And then, a presence beside her. The man in the white dishdasha had appeared, stepping into the conversation with an ease that sent a ripple of silence through the small crowd. The officers immediately stiffened. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked in Arabic, his voice low and commanding. The officer hesitated, shifting uneasily. "This woman is undocumented. We were preparing to detain her." The stranger's dark eyes settled on Emily. His gaze was unreadable, his expression calm but firm. "You will not detain her," he said. "This woman is my future wife." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her gaze snapped to him, searching his face for any sign of deceit. "Is that true?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. The man held her gaze steadily. "Yes," he answered smoothly, as if the words carried no weight at all. "You will come with me." His hand extended toward her, firm, steady, an anchor in the storm of her fear and confusion. And with nowhere else to turn, Emily hesitated only a moment before taking it. Emily barely processed what was happening as she was led through the crowded streets, her fingers still wrapped around the stranger's hand. The officers had stepped aside without argument, their postures stiff with deference. Whoever this man was, his authority was unquestionable. Her mind reeled. Who was he? Why had he intervened? And more importantly, what had she just agreed to? The city blurred past her in a haze of heat and golden light as they entered a sleek black car waiting at the curb. The door closed with a quiet finality, sealing her fate before she could even begin to protest. Silence stretched between them as the vehicle moved smoothly through the streets. Emily could feel his presence beside her, the controlled stillness of him, as though he were accustomed to waiting for people to break under the weight of his gaze. She refused to be the first to speak. Finally, he broke the silence. "My name is Kamal bin Rashid." His voice was deep, steady, measured in a way that suggested he rarely needed to raise it. She turned to him, her jaw tightening. "And I'm supposed to believe I'm suddenly your future wife?" His lips curved slightly, though there was no humor in it. "It was the most efficient way to remove you from an unfortunate situation." Her pulse quickened. "And now what? I just go along with whatever you have planned?" Kamal studied her for a moment before responding. "You were stranded. You had no money, no legal status. I offered you protection." Protection? The word sent a chill through her. She wasn't naive enough to believe that powerful men in foreign cities offered kindness without expecting something in return. The car slowed as they approached an estate, unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Towering gates opened soundlessly, revealing a sprawling villa bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. Marble columns lined the grand entrance, their intricate carvings catching the last light of day. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, carried by the evening breeze. Emily stepped out hesitantly, her battered sneakers scuffing against the polished stone. She was acutely aware of how out of place she looked. Dust-covered, exhausted, her clothes wrinkled and stained from the day's heat. Kamal's expression remained unreadable as he gestured toward the entrance. "Welcome to my home." Emily swallowed, her throat dry. This wasn't just a home, it was a kingdom. The grand hall was unlike anything she had ever seen. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, its facets scattering light across the pristine floors. Ornate tapestries lined the walls, their intricate patterns telling stories of history and wealth. Servants moved with quiet efficiency, their presence barely noticeable. Emily took a shaky breath. She had stepped into another world. Kamal watched her closely. "I assume you have questions." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Questions? Let's start with the obvious. Why am I here?" He tilted his head slightly, considering her. "Because I saw something in you." Emily's fingers curled into fists. "And what exactly did you see?" "Resilience," he said simply. "You were alone in a city that does not forgive weakness. Yet you did not beg. You did not collapse under the weight of your misfortune. That is rare." She narrowed her eyes. "So what? You just collect lost foreigners like some kind of charity case?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Hardly." Something about his tone unsettled her. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the whole truth either. Emily exhaled sharply. "What do you want from me, Kamal?" His expression turned serious. "For now, rest. You will find that this house is more comfortable than the streets." There it was again. That deliberate vagueness. A servant appeared at his side, bowing slightly before speaking in Arabic. Kamal nodded, then turned back to Emily. "My staff will prepare a room for you. New clothes, food, whatever you need." Emily shook her head, a defiant edge creeping into her voice. "I don't want charity." His gaze darkened slightly. "It is not charity. It is an opportunity." Her stomach twisted. Opportunity for what? She opened her mouth to demand answers, but he had already turned, walking away with the effortless grace of someone who knew the world bent to his will. And just like that, Emily was left standing in the middle of a palace, surrounded by luxury, yet feeling more trapped than she ever had before. Emily sat on the edge of the enormous bed, her fingers gripping the silk sheets as though they could anchor her in reality. The room she had been given was breathtaking. Cream-colored drapes cascaded from the ceiling, wrapping the space in an ethereal glow. A golden chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floors, and the faint scent of jasmine and myrrh lingered in the air. It felt more like a dream than anything real. The knock at the door made her jump. She turned, finding a young servant standing at the threshold, her head slightly bowed. "Miss," the girl said softly, "it is time." "Time?" Emily frowned. "Time for what?" The girl hesitated. "For the ceremony." A sharp, uneasy sensation crawled up Emily's spine. "What ceremony?" Instead of answering, the girl gestured for her to follow. Emily wanted to refuse, to demand an explanation, but her body betrayed her, rising to its feet. As she stepped out into the hallway, she felt as though she were being led deeper into something she could neither understand nor control. The villa's halls were eerily silent, the only sound the faint whisper of fabric as the servant walked ahead. The path led downward into a quieter wing of the estate. Emily's unease grew with every step. Then they stopped before an ornate wooden door. The servant pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. Inside stood Kamal. His usual composed expression held an unreadable intensity as he turned toward her. His white dish dasha contrasted sharply against the darkened room, the light from the flickering oil lamps casting long shadows across his face. Beside him stood an older man in flowing robes, his hands resting on an ancient-looking book. His face was calm, his expression serene. Something about the scene sent a rush of alarm through Emily's chest. "What is this?" she demanded, stepping back slightly. Kamal moved toward her, his tone as smooth as always. "A ceremony, Emily, a small blessing." Her heartbeat quickened. "A blessing for what?" "For you," Kamal said. "For us." The pieces clicked into place all at once. She stiffened. "Number absolutely not." Kamal's dark eyes studied her carefully. "It is merely words, Emily." "Words?" Her voice was shaking now. "What kind of words?" The elder man began speaking in Arabic, his voice deep and rhythmic, the cadence soothing yet laced with something unfamiliar. Emily turned sharply toward Kamal. "Translate." Kamal smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "He is offering prayers for protection, for guidance." Emily wasn't sure she believed him. The elder's voice continued, and then suddenly he turned to her, speaking directly. The words meant nothing to her, a foreign melody wrapped in reverence. She swallowed hard, looking back at Kamal. "What did he say?" Kamal's smile remained in place. "Repeat after him. That is all." Emily's blood turned cold. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to run, but she felt frozen beneath the weight of Kamal's gaze. "You are safe," he assured her. "Trust me." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Kamal's voice lowered, turning almost gentle. "Emily, just say the words." A heavy silence pressed down on her, thick and suffocating. And then, she did it. The words felt foreign, strange as they rolled off her tongue, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment she finished, the elder closed his book with a quiet but definitive thud. Kamal turned toward her, his eyes sharp, intense. Then, in a voice as soft as silk, he said, "Congratulations." Emily felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Congratulations. For what?" Kamal's gaze remained steady. "We are married now." The words shattered inside her, sending her mind spiraling into chaos. Married. She had spoken words she didn't understand, and now she was— "No," she breathed, taking a step back. "That's not possible." Kamal moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "It is already done, Emily." She shook her head, her heart pounding against her ribs. "No, I didn't agree. I didn't—" "You did," Kamal said smoothly. "You spoke the vows." Emily's pulse roared in her ears. "That wasn't consent." Kamal's expression remained unreadable. "In my culture, it is binding." Her breath came in ragged gasps. The golden walls of the chamber felt like they were closing in, suffocating her. "This isn't real," she whispered, shaking. "This can't be real." Kamal stepped even closer, his voice low. "You are my wife now, Emily. You are safe. You will want for nothing." A cold horror settled in her bones. She had walked into a cage disguised as a palace, and she had no idea how to escape. Emily felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had unknowingly spoken vows in a language she didn't understand, and now, according to Kamal and his culture, she was bound to him as his wife. This couldn't be happening. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. Without thinking, she turned and bolted out of the dimly lit chamber, her pulse hammering in her ears. The weight of Kamal's unreadable gaze lingered on her back, but he did not try to stop her. Not yet. The corridors of the estate stretched endlessly before her, each one identical to the last. She ran without direction, her breath ragged, her thoughts fragmented. All she knew was that she needed to get out, away from him, away from whatever this was. But the villa was a labyrinth, a palace designed to swallow intruders whole. The golden walls, the perfumed air, the endless silence, everything about this place felt like a dream she couldn't wake up from. Finally, she stumbled through a dimly lit passage, her hands skimming against the cold stone walls. The scent of jasmine faded, replaced by something stale, untouched by the outside world. The deeper she went, the more the grandeur above seemed to disappear. Then she saw it. At the end of the corridor, past a heavy wooden door left slightly ajar, was a large canvas draped in silk. It stood alone in the darkened space, the gold frame catching the dim light. Something about it sent a shiver through her spine. With trembling hands, she reached out and lifted the veil. Her breath stopped. The painting was of her. No, impossible. But there she was, staring back at herself from the canvas. The woman in the portrait was younger, her hair longer, her face untouched by the exhaustion she carried now. The soft expression on her painted lips was one she barely recognized. Emily stumbled backward, her heart hammering in terror. This was painted years ago. But how? Why did it exist? Her mind spiraled, trying to piece together an explanation, but the edges of her vision blurred. A wave of dizziness overtook her, the suffocating air pressing in from all sides. Then, darkness. She collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Somewhere above, the villa was quiet, the guests from the evening's dinner long gone. Kamal stood in his study, listening intently as a servant approached with a bowed head. "Your Excellency," the man said cautiously, "she has not been seen since the ceremony." Kamal's spine straightened. A ripple of unease passed through him. "Find her," he ordered. The servant nodded, disappearing down the hall as a team of guards was dispatched throughout the estate. Kamal remained still, his expression betraying nothing, but deep inside, something sharp twisted in his chest. Where had she gone? More importantly, why did the thought of losing her unsettle him so deeply? Then realization struck him. If she had been searching for a way out, she would have gone to the most hidden place in the estate, the one place even the servants rarely entered. The basement. His pulse quickened as he strode toward the secluded corridor, his mind racing. And when he reached the doorway, the sight before him sent an unfamiliar jolt of panic through his veins. Emily lay crumpled on the ground, the silk cloth discarded beside her, the portrait fully exposed. Kamal's breath hitched. She had seen it, and now nothing would ever be the same. Kamal dropped to his knees beside Emily, his usually composed expression fracturing as he gently cupped her face. Her skin was cool, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. Relief coursed through him, though it was quickly overshadowed by something far more complicated. She had seen the portrait, a portrait she was never meant to see. Kamal tapped her cheeks lightly. "Emily, wake up." She stirred, her eyelids fluttering before her hazel eyes slowly opened. For a moment, she looked dazed, her gaze unfocused. Then, recognition struck her like a thunderbolt. Her body tensed beneath his touch. "Get away from me." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but laced with unmistakable fear. Kamal let go of her immediately, his hands falling to his sides. Emily struggled to sit up, wincing as her head pounded. The memory of what she had seen slammed into her with full force. She turned her head sharply, her eyes locking onto the portrait once more. There was no mistake. It was her, or someone who looked exactly like her. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. What the hell is this? Kamal exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. He had known this moment would come, but he had never expected it to happen like this. After a long silence, he finally answered. "That woman was my wife." Emily's breath caught. Was? A cold wave of realization swept over her. She's dead?" Kamal nodded, his expression unreadable. 5 years ago." Emily felt sick. She looked back at the painting, taking in every detail. The same shade of brown in her eyes, the same curve of her lips, even the way her hair fell over her shoulders. It was eerie. "Why does she look like me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Kamal's gaze darkened. "I don't know." Emily turned to him sharply. "That's not good enough." Kamal held her stare. "I swear to you I don't have an answer. When I first saw you, it was like seeing a ghost." His voice was lower now, rougher, carrying a weight she didn't expect. "I wasn't looking for you, Emily, but the moment I saw you, I couldn't turn away. You reminded me of her, yes, but that's not why I helped you." He hesitated. At least, not entirely. Emily's pulse was racing. She wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but something about his voice, about the quiet agony in his expression, held her in place. "Then why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kamal inhaled deeply before speaking. "Because I wanted to protect you." Emily let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "By marrying me against my will?" Regret flickered across his face. "I see now that I was wrong." Silence stretched between them. For the first time since she met him, Kamal's carefully built armor was cracking. "You deserved a choice," he admitted, his voice raw. "And I took that from you." Emily clenched her hands into fists. "You think?" A flicker of amusement crossed his face at her sarcasm, but it was gone just as quickly. Then his expression turned solemn again. "You are free to leave." Emily froze. She had expected resistance. She had expected him to try to keep her here. But this she hadn't expected. Kamal met her stunned gaze. "You said you didn't want to be a pawn, that you are remarkable even without wealth. And you were right." He took a slow step back. "I won't force you to stay." The words echoed in the stillness of the basement. Emily's breath came out unsteady. She had been fighting so hard to escape, but now that the door was wide open, why did she feel so conflicted? She studied him, this man who had saved her, trapped her, and now let her go. And for the first time she saw something different in him. Vulnerability. Real, unguarded emotion. She swallowed hard, her voice softer now. "And if I leave?" Kamal's jaw tightened slightly. "Then I will make sure you have everything you need, a way home, a future of your own choosing." Emily's chest tightened. She had expected a captor. Instead, she had found a man who, in his own flawed way, had been just as lost as she was. She looked down, her mind racing. Then she whispered, "And if I stay?" Kamal stilled. For a long moment neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. Then he took a slow breath, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Then you stay as my equal." Emily met his gaze, searching for deception, for hesitation. But there was none. Her heart pounded as she made the hardest decision of her life. She took a step closer, and then another. "I choose you," she said quietly. Kamal's breath hitched. Emily exhaled shakily, her lips twitching in the faintest of smiles. "Not because I have no choice, but because I want to." For the first time since they met, Kamal truly smiled. A small, genuine thing, but enough to break through the last of the walls between them. And just like that, the fate they had once fought against became a choice they both embraced. Sometimes, destiny is not written for us. It is the path we choose for ourselves. Emily's story reminds us that true strength lies not in wealth or protection, but in the ability to decide our own future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What would you have done in Emily's place? Until next time, remember, sometimes life's most valuable treasures are the choices we make for ourselves.